Good. Morning. Thank you so much for being here today. We've got a great group. We'll try to get through this fast. Thank you so much. I'm humbled to be here with so many of our colleagues to commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance Day and this year, the 78th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Today we remember the 6 million Jews and millions more, Roman Catholics, Protestants, Russians, Poles, Ukrainians, Serbs, Romanians, the mentally and physically disabled, so many others who were murdered in the Holocaust. We must always remember the Shoah and recommit ourselves to learning the lessons of the attempt to eliminate European Jewry. As we mark this important day, we're all joining together, Democrats and Republicans, to announce new bipartisan legislation, the Holocaust Education Anti-Semitism Lessons Act, or HEAL Act, with more than 60 original co-sponsors as we introduce it today, and we've had more just this morning asked to sign on. We all have an obligation to teach future generations about this evil. We have an obligation to try to heal our communities. We have an obligation to teach about this stain of hatred so that it never happens again. This day is deeply significant to me and to my family. I'm the grandson of a World War II veteran who fought the Nazis, and my wife's grandparents lost nearly their entire family in the Holocaust. I know there are others who are here on this stage with me who lost loved ones in the Shoah as well, or whose families fought valiantly against the Nazis. It's critically important that we come together to commemorate this solemn day, not only to remember the victims of the Holocaust murdered by the Nazis in gas chambers and concentration camps, simply for being Jewish, but also because history must teach us that we have a solemn responsibility to learn the lessons of the past and confront the bigotry, hatred, and intolerance of today and tomorrow, wherever and whenever it is found, so that no one ever has to experience the atrocities that needlessly took 6 million. We cannot and we must not ever ignore the stunning rise in anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial across Europe, across the world, and increasingly here in the United States, including the violent anti-Semitic attacks we've experienced in New Jersey and I know in so many places around the country. The mounting evidence and that the knowledge about the Holocaust is beginning to fade should alarm us all. The Anti-Defamation League's audit of anti-Semitic incidents recorded more than 2,700 incidents across the United States, a 34% increase from 2020, the highest number on record since ADL began tracking these events. Surveys in recent years show that many Americans know too little about the Holocaust. A 2020 survey measuring Holocaust awareness found that roughly 2/3 of those asked did not know about how many Jews died in the Holocaust. They didn't know about it. The survey of Americans between 18 and 40 also found that 48% could not name one concentration camp or ghetto. What does this show us? In some aspects, it's Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, it's not just here, but it's in Austria, France, Canada, and around Europe. But the bigger issue is that we must make sure that people, young people especially, learn about the Holocaust so that it never happens again. As Elie Wiesel said, indifference, after all, is more dangerous than anger or hatred. We need to make sure, because right now, according to analysis from Axios, the majority of the United States don't have laws requiring public school students to learn about the horrors of the Holocaust. Imagine that. So hopefully people will visit the Holocaust Museum and learn, but unfortunately in too many parts of this country, they don't know. And that's what the HEAL Act is all about. It's bipartisan legislation asking the Holocaust Memorial Museum to conduct a study on Holocaust education in public schools nationwide so they can understand. The outcome of this study will show us which states and school districts require or do not require Holocaust education in their curriculum, whether or not Holocaust education is merely optional. It will identify standards and requirements for schools. It will tell us the types and quality of instructional materials used to teach, and it will identify the approaches used by schools. Basically, it's an audit to understand what's going on so that we can address the issue. Again, I want to thank everyone who's with us today, Democrats and Republicans. This is just the beginning of this legislation. I'm eager to get it to the President's desk, and I know everyone is behind us working with the Holocaust Museum for their help to help us get this done. I know that if we stand together as Democrats and Republicans in the greatest country in the world, there's no reason why we can't make sure that there's never, ever again, the atrocity that happened in Europe. Thank you so much. May God bless our great country. Let us protect our children. And now I'd like to turn to Kathy Manning, who works so closely with me on this legislation. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Kathy Manning. I represent North Carolina's 6th Congressional District. And I want to thank my friend and colleague, Congressman Gottheimer, for bringing us together today and for all of his work on this important bill. We're gathered here today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, 78 years since the liberation of Auschwitz, 90 years since the Nazis rose to power in 1933. We made a solemn promise, never again, and we know that the fight against bigotry, ignorance, and intolerance, education is the most powerful tool we have. We're also here today because, sadly, too many Americans know too little about the Holocaust. Survey after survey has found major gaps in basic knowledge about the Holocaust, particularly among young people. That is deeply concerning, but we believe this is about more than just a history lesson. As Elie Wiesel reminded us, the Holocaust is also about the perils of indifference and the fragility of freedom. We believe that education about the Holocaust and about the history of anti-Semitism is vital because it can help teach students how to be moral citizens. It allows them to learn valuable lessons about bearing witness, about building tolerance and civic values, about the importance of democracy and the responsibility we all have to confront hate, to speak up instead of becoming mere bystanders. That is why Congress passed the Never Again Education Act in the 116th Congress, and why we are continuing to work through the HEAL Act during this Congress to improve and expand education about the Holocaust in every state. It's our hope that efforts like this bill today can help the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum work with each state to help improve and grow the field of Holocaust education nationwide. As we know, Holocaust education is just one tool. As co-chair of the House Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism, I am committed to working with members of both parties, with Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, the U.S. Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism, with the Second Gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and with the White House's new interagency group to counter anti-Semitism, to confront this evil in all of its forms. I am deeply moved to be here with so many of my colleagues today. We must take action in every way we can to learn from history, to help students recognize hate, and to build a better and more tolerant future for all. Thank you. And I next call upon Congressman David Kustoff. David is not here. I call on one of our new colleagues, Congressman Jared Moskowitz.
Good morning. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you all the representatives behind me for co-sponsoring. Thank you to Congressman Gottheimer to bringing this forward. As the grandson of a grandmother, unlike George Santos, who escaped the Holocaust, as part of the Kindertransport out of Germany, it is so important to have Holocaust education. As the grandson of a grandfather who escaped the pogroms in Poland and the sole survivor of his family, it's so important to have Holocaust education. I remember thinking when I was growing up as a child that it was easy to combat anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, and these statements of, well, the Holocaust wasn't that bad or not that many people were killed, because we had actual real witnesses to the Holocaust, people who survived, who could testify what happened to them and their families, people with numbers tattooed on their arms. And as we face the reality that those people are leaving us, it is so important that we pass on to the next generation what happened, the atrocities that were committed, not just to the Jewish people, but 11 million people. The atrocities that Hitler committed to humans is one of the worst atrocities we've ever seen on the planet. And quite frankly, the only person who should ever be compared to Hitler is Hitler. And so thank you, Representative Gottheimer, for bringing this forward. It's so important for people to learn, because never again only is going to matter if people understand what actually happened. So thank you. I'd like to call on Congresswoman.
Republican, so I was trying to.
Oh, well, who would you like to be next? It's your show.
No, it's another Republican. I just want to go. You want to go?
No, I'm not speaking.
You want to go?
All right, well, Congressman Dunn.
Thank you very much, Jared. And thank you, Josh. Thank you very much for bringing us together on this occasion. Today we remember millions of innocent men and women and their families who were impacted by the Holocaust. It's hard to believe that such evil exists, but it does. And it's important that we remember this particularly vile episode in human history so that we never repeat its like again. Hate should never be tolerated. Anti-Semitism should never be tolerated. It's imperative that we continue to teach about this tragic event so that we can, in fact, ensure that it never happens again. And that's why I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of the HEAL Act with Representative Gottheimer. Thank you so much. No. Well, I don't know what Rogers, I'll let you say.
Oh, sorry. Now we can get back on schedule. Bonnie Watson Coleman, New Jersey.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for sponsoring this legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, I represent the 12th Congressional District in the state of New Jersey, probably one of the most diverse in the country. And so today, we remember one of the most evil acts of hatred in the history of humanity. We honor the memory of those who were murdered by the Nazi regime, including the 6 million Jews. As a Black woman whose community has faced tragedy that has often been denied or overlooked, I stand firmly with my colleagues on this Holocaust Remembrance Day. At a time when the teaching of history is under attack, the lessons of the Holocaust are more urgent now than ever. Anti-Semitism is experiencing a frightening resurgence in the United States and across the globe. And recent remarks by well-known public figures threaten to stoke the same fires that the hate that brought the Nazi Party to power during that awful time and resulting in that awful genocide. As public servants, as leaders of the free world, and as fundamentally decent human beings, we have a moral obligation to acknowledge the Holocaust, remember its victims, and pledge ourselves to making sure that it never happens again. So I support the HEAL Act, the Holocaust Education and Anti-Semitism Lessons Act, because it is essential that the next generation of Americans knows the complete truth about our world's all too recent history. Only by healing from the wounds of our past can we pave the way to a future in this country that we all say we want. Thank you. Who?
Tom.
Oh, Tom Kane, New Jersey.
Colleague from
Tom
New Jersey.
Kane.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. It's humbling to be with you today, and thank you, Congressman Gottheimer, for your leadership on this issue and so many issues of importance. It's together that we come here today, Republicans, Democrats alike, to stand and make sure that future generations understand an accurate history. The Holocaust was one of the darkest times in human history. We can never allow this history to ever repeat itself. The importance of having the Holocaust Memorial Museum learn about what other states or what's happening in states around this country is we can understand what is being taught and what is not being taught. The children across this nation. On that day of the dedication of the museum and I was there, Eli Wiesel said very clearly, we must stand up against anti-Semitism and against hate in every single corner of the globe. We have to make sure that the children of our nation are being taught about the darkest times in our history, and that they have comprehensive Holocaust education programs, and make sure that that threat that we are coming together to remember and to discuss today is never ever repeated. And it's important we come together as a Congress. And next is Haley Stevens. She is here.
Well, thank you to my colleagues for the HEAL Act and our opportunity to recognize what today means. Today, January 27th, the day that Auschwitz concentration camp was liberated in 1945. It's almost 80 years ago. We come together to remember the 6 million Jews who were horrifically killed in the Holocaust. Today, as we honor and mourn those lost, we reaffirm our commitment to human rights, tolerance, and education. Michigan's 11th Congressional District, Oakland County, Michigan, is home to the Ziegelman Holocaust Center in Farmington Hills. And I am so honored to represent this incredible museum and monument that is visited by over 100,000 Michiganders each year. I was also pleased to secure $550,000 in community funding for the Zinkelman Center to strengthen and expand their outreach programs. This enables them to fund teacher training programs in Holocaust and genocide education, ensuring that we're teaching our children how to heed the lessons of our past and respond thoughtfully to the tragedies unfolding around the world today, a tragedy that is certainly marked by rising anti-Semitism. Last August, we marked 80 years since the United States entered World War II. An entire generation has passed. I think often about how few Holocaust survivors and those who so bravely fought for their liberation we have left. The Zinkelman Center has several docents who are Holocaust survivors, and I have been blessed to hear their stories firsthand, and they have shaped me and my work in Congress tremendously. Their stories have never been more important, and we must affirm our commitment to Holocaust education and honor its critical role in the global fight against anti-Semitism. Thank you, Mr. Gottheimer, for your steadfast leadership on this issue. Thank you to all my colleagues, and I look forward to the passage of the HEAL Act. On this day and every day, I renew my commitment to fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism and vow to use my voice to call out hatred and intolerance wherever I see it. Thank you. And with that, do you want me to go to Miss Chantel Brown? In order. Yep, here we go.
All right, thank you, Haley.
Go ahead. Sorry, please.
Okay. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Josh. On this Holocaust Remembrance Day, and at a time when anti-Semitism, hate speech, and Holocaust denial are on the rise, it is essential to confront bigotry, intolerance whenever and wherever it manifests. The Bipartisan HEAL Act improves Holocaust education in our schools so that future generations will be better prepared to learn from the past to avoid repeating history's most devastating mistakes. Last year, together with Ohio colleagues, I was proud to deliver national recognition for the Cole Israel Foundation Holocaust Memorial in my district, which will educate visitors about the Holocaust and ensure millions of victims will never be forgotten. Through the HEAL Act, we will ensure that our students learn that there is no place for hate in America. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much. I think Brad Schneider was next.
Thank you and good morning. 90 years ago, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, and no one believed the unthinkable that he was already talking about, that he had already written about in his book, Mein Kampf. 80 years ago, in the midst of the Shoah, the evil that was the Shoah, singular evil, was incomprehensible, inconceivable. And it wasn't until 78 years ago, when the camps began to be liberated, today marking the 78th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, that the world could see for itself, but still could not understand. That's what this bill is about. It's been 90 years since Hitler was elected, 78 years since the camps were liberated and the war came to an end, and there are very few people with living memories of what happened. Something as abstract as the Holocaust, so incomprehensible and inconceivable, has to be made real for all of us to understand and ensure that nothing like it ever happens again. That's what this bill is about. I'll ask you, how many of you know or have heard the stories, had the privilege of hearing the first-hand eyewitness testimony of a Holocaust survivor? Very few of us left. How do we, without their living experiences, make sure that every American understands the reality of what was the greatest evil this world has ever known? Understands their role in making sure it never happens again, understands that America as a bulwark has to stand strong. That's what this bill is about, making sure that our young people learn the lessons of the Holocaust, understand the reality of the Holocaust, can stand up to the deniers of the Holocaust and the spreaders of hate, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. This bill is so important. Teaching the lessons of the Shoah is so important. And so I'm grateful to my colleagues, to Mr. Gottheimer for leading, coming together and together saying that we will take the abstract and make it real and teach our children the lessons of the Holocaust. So never again is not just words, but a promise to future generations. Thank you.
Adriano.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for your great work on the HEAL Act. I represent a district that has in it a neighborhood that welcome and many survivors of the Holocaust and people like Henry Kissinger and the great and late Jacob Javits, and Dr. Roof still lives there. They all went, many of them went to a local high school, George Washington High School. And that high school now is made up, the student body is made up primarily of immigrants. And we were successful in putting together a pilot project, a curriculum on the Holocaust. And I recently spoke to the principal of that high school, and she told me how empowering it was for those students to learn about the Holocaust. They knew nothing about it. And so this act is so important. We see how there's still approximately about 50,000 survivors of the Holocaust. Some of them live in my district. And it is important that we continue to speak about this and educate young people. Education is probably the best tool that we have available for all of us to continue to make sure that this never happens again. And so as a co-chair of the Latino Jewish Caucus, I am committed to working with Josh and with all of my colleagues in making sure that this act is approved and signed into law, that we must never forget. But when we say that, we must put it into action. And action often is educating our young people to ensure that they learn about this horrible chapter in the history of the world, and that we honor those that perish, that we honor those that are still around and their families, that we are sympathetic and that we are also in solidarity with that community. When we do that, all ships rise at the same time. Let's heal. Thank you.
Mr. Moulton.
Thank you to my colleagues, and thank you, Josh, for putting forward this legislation. I feel fortunate to have grown up in a town in Massachusetts where there are a lot of Jewish kids, a lot of Catholic kids, a lot of Protestant kids. It didn't really seem to matter. Some kids went to Hebrew school, some kids went to CCD, some kids went to Sunday school. The only thing in common is I don't think any of us liked it all that much. But sadly, as proud as I am of that history, I'm ashamed that anti-Semitism is on the rise back home. We're going backwards today. Adolf Hitler came to power in a democracy. He was elected by capitalizing on bigotry, by deepening divisions within his society, and by using that to political advantage. It's hard to imagine the scale of the Holocaust today. And yet the foundations for that hate still exist. They still exist around the world, and they still exist in America. That's why education is so important, and that's why we still have a lot of work to do. And next, I am delighted to introduce Congresswoman Federica Wilson from Florida.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Josh, for your great work. And hello and good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be standing here with my colleagues on International Holocaust Remembrance Day as we honor the memory of individuals, mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, friends, and neighbors whose lives were lost in the Holocaust. On this day, we commit ourselves to preserving the memory of those who lived through the horrors and inhumanity of this dark time in history so that their experiences are never, ever forgotten by this generation or the next. I'm honored to be a co-sponsor of the HEAL Act and to ensure we continue to honor the stories of the survivors and victims of Nazi persecution, including LGBTQ+, disabled, and other marginalized groups who have demonstrated incredible resilience throughout the years. With the HEAL Act, we will ensure our students' history books tell the complete truth of one of the most egregious and despicable acts in human history, and they are taught the importance of confronting hate, bigotry, and anti-Semitism wherever and whenever it arises. Today and every day, we stand in solidarity and mourn with the Jewish communities worldwide. No amount of swastikas graffitied on storefronts, painted on walls, or projected on buildings will deter our support of our Jewish communities or lessen our commitment to fight against intolerance of any kind. The HEAL Act is an essential step to continue to build towards a more accepting society that values discourse instead of division, acceptance over anti-Semitism, and compassion instead of callousness. I'm proud to support this legislation and to stand up for the Jewish communities in District 24 of Florida and across America. I yield back.
Excellent. Continuing that great tradition of Florida, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz.
Thank you so much. I'm so proud to join my friend Josh Gottheimer and all the diverse array of colleagues that are standing here against hate. It's difficult to put into words how distressing and disturbing it is that we've had a massive rise in anti-Semitism. Each of the Jewish members, in particular, many of us who represent large Jewish communities, can describe to you the painful attacks that have been spreading like wildfire across the country, most recently in my hometown multiple times. Ultimately, the perpetrators who sprayed graffiti, anti-Semitic graffiti and racist graffiti all over the playgrounds and street signs in a neighborhood in my community, they turned out to be teenagers. Teenagers who thought that it was just a joke, that they were trying to be funny. It's no wonder that we have had a massive desensitization and a huge increase in the belief that the Holocaust never happened. The latest ADL survey of adults found the widespread belief in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and tropes had doubled from what they found in 2019, with a startling number of Americans believing Jews are more loyal to Israel than to the U.S., or that we, quote, don't care about anyone other than themselves. This is critical legislation. As we lose the last remaining survivors of the Holocaust, who are the most elderly in our country and were child survivors at this point, it is more important than ever that we make sure that from the federal government through the state and local and school districts across this country, that we prioritize educating about the most significant atrocity that the world has ever experienced so that it never happens again. I'll just close by sharing more personal experience, because each of us could share either a racist, anti-Semitic, or culturally biased experience that we've had. But you should know that hate knows no borders, that in particular, we have had a massive spike in anti-Semitic, racist, and bias hatred spread because of the internet, because social media is unchecked. My own daughters and son have experienced distorted pictures of themselves being taken from their own posts
with cartoon Zyklon gas canisters being placed in their hands, cartoon Jewish stars of David, yellow Jewish stars of David from the Holocaust placed on their bodies and reposted by anti-Semitic haters. We have to make sure that we educate children across the country to grow up understanding that never again is absolutely a critical thing that they need to absorb in their hearts, and that we need to all come together to stand against hate and understand that an atrocity like the Holocaust happened and that it can never happen again. Thank you again to Mr. Gottheimer and my colleagues who are original co-sponsors.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman from New York.
Thank you very much, Congressman Gottheimer, for spearheading this incredibly important piece of legislation in a bipartisan way. We often say the words never forget, or never again, we say. But as the representative of Borough Park in Brooklyn, which has the largest population of Holocaust survivors and their families in the country, and as a proud American Jew myself, this is deeply personal to me and my constituents, because too much and too often people are forgetting. And if people forget, then it will happen again. My grandmother escaped anti-Semitism from the pogroms in Russia and was lucky enough to avoid the Holocaust as a result of that. But certainly we all know many people, and I have very close friends whose relatives died in the Holocaust. I'd like to stand here and read the names of so many in my district who have lost loved ones, but the list is too long. So today on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, we must acknowledge the uncomfortable reality that we as a country are not adequately passing on the lessons of the Holocaust to our next generations. Just in my area, the tri-state area in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, anti-Semitic incidents are up by 4 times in the last 8 years. A Holocaust denier dined with the former president. And that's why it's so important that we pass this piece of legislation so that we can truly understand exactly what the education of the Holocaust is around the country so that we will never forget. I thank Congressman Gottheimer for spearheading this. This is a very important first step as we begin to lose the last remaining survivors of the Holocaust and need to make sure that we teach it in our schools. Thank you. Yep, Chrissy Houlihan.
Thank you. I'm Chrissy Houlihan. I represent Pennsylvania's 6th Congressional District, the western suburbs of Philadelphia. A little more than a mile from here, in fact, I looked it up on Google Maps, my now 81-year-old dad, Andrew Christopher Alexander Jampoler, stands every Friday, this Friday being no exception, greeting visitors and school groups at the United States Holocaust Museum. He is a survivor, born Jewish into World War II, and hidden with falsified papers in plain sight during the war under the protection of a childless Christian couple. His mother and his grandmother also survived, as well as an older cousin, and that's all. The rest were murdered. He came to America as a young boy with his mom and grandmother and has led a life of service every single day since. He does this service in particular each Friday to educate the next generation. But he will not be here forever, and we must not ever forget. So that's why I'm here, literally, and so grateful for the chance to support this important bill, the HEAL Act. We must never forget, and we must always educate ourselves and future generations to prevent these horrors. I thank Josh and others for this very important effort, and I yield back.
And Pat Ryan from New York is going to help us close. Thank you so much, Pat.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to my colleagues. I know I think votes were just called, so I will be very brief. It's an honor to be with everyone today. I represent the 18th Congressional District in the Hudson Valley of New York, also home to a significant Jewish population and many Holocaust survivors who I've spoken with extensively and carry their their spirit and their memories today with all of you. The fact that 78 years after Auschwitz, my children, 1 and 3 years old, who are members of the next and youngest generation of American Jews, have to go to a playground in my hometown of Gardner, New York, similar to your story, Debbie, see a swastika scrawled on a slide on a playground designed for 1 to 3-year-olds, and my 3-year-old asks me, "Dad, what is that?" And my wife and I stay up that night trying to think about how to explain this to our 3-year-old is unacceptable, is disgusting, and is sadly representative of, as we've heard from our colleagues, what's happening in our country and across the world. So I'm so proud to be here today taking action on this Remembrance Day with my colleagues in a bipartisan way to make sure that we heal these divides and that we never allow this to happen again. So thank you, Josh, and thank you to all my colleagues.
Thank you. Thanks. Are there any questions? If not, we've got to get to votes. Sure. Jonathan?
Congressman Gottheimer, what made you decide at this point to introduce this type of legislation, and has the actions even in Congress where this anti-Semitism on both sides influenced your decision to bring this bill out at this time?
Well, I think all of us who are behind me and those who've spoken have seen, as you know, a significant spike in their own communities at home of anti-Semitism. They've experienced it personally, or as Debbie so artfully said, whether it's racist acts or other forms of bigotry. We know by all the statistics that as Holocaust survivors pass, and unfortunately the distance grows from the direct pain that people can hear from a Holocaust survivor, it's even more important now than ever that we make sure we teach our children. And unfortunately, as well, if you look at the statistics that many of my colleagues also shared and that I shared, we've seen an enormous spike in last years of anti-Semitic attacks and incidents, right? So we know there's a huge significant spike of anti-Semitic incidents. We know that the distance has grown where people can hear directly, which means that the need for education, even in our schools, is even greater. And we also know, lastly, that the education in our schools is, the actual consistency is not there, right? Some schools do a very good job in their curriculum. Other schools aren't teaching it at all. Some states require it in Holocaust education. Some states don't require it at all. This legislation working with the Holocaust Museum will help address that and to actually understand what's being taught where, so that we as a Congress can come back, look at that information, and try to make some decisions of how we can help ensure that across the country our children learn.
As you push forward to that point where eventually you will take the information from this study and then try to put some kind of baseline across the country in terms of what's being taught in schools, it comes against a backdrop where we're seeing at the state level restrictions put on certain types of educational focuses. For example, in Florida, most recently with AP Black History. What does it tell you that you guys are trying to do this at the same time that states are also trying to take that kind of a more narrow approach?
Well, I can't speak to all. No, Debbie can speak. Debbie, you want this one?
I'll take this one. Well, I'll take part of it. Thankfully, we have more sanity up here in Washington than in some of the states like mine. We have a governor in Florida who describes anything that tries to ensure that we avoid the horrors of the past and make sure that we're able to have American kids grow up with understanding and harmony and equity and the perception that we are all equal under the same Constitution. That we have a governor in Florida that describes that as woke ideology. Well, at least thankfully in D.C., particularly because we have a bipartisan group of members even on the House side that understand that education is the key to make sure that we can prevent this violence and bigotry and hatred from happening again. That's a distinct difference. And so that's why the Founding Fathers were pretty brilliant when they helped create a mechanism when one body, one part of the government refuses to do something, there's a way to use another mechanism to achieve it.
I just want to add one thing to it. It's not for Congress to dictate what's going to be taught. I think for our challenge is how do we identify what's succeeding and promote and share that across the country. The scope and scale is so great. At the beginning of the World War II, 9 million Jews lived in Europe. At the end, 2 out of every 3 of those Jews had been murdered. How do we make sure American students, next generations, understand that scale, understand the trajectory from where it came an election in 1933 to a Shoah, a Holocaust in the 1940s, and make sure that we continue to teach that in the most effective and comprehensive way. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, then I know we got to go vote in a second. Sorry.
To
Yes,
just sort
and
of follow up on that, I mean, like my colleague said, there's been, particularly from one side of the aisle, sort of efforts to kind of expand what those folks are calling parental choice in education, kind of educational standards set at the state and local level. Do you anticipate that sort of running in conflict with the goals that you're sort of pursuing here? And then on a more technical level, I know when this was first introduced at the end of last year, this was the report was coming through the Department of Education. Now it's coming through the Holocaust Museum. Particular reason for that change?
So your first question, no. On the second question, no, there was no reason to change. We just worked closely with the Holocaust Museum, and given last year's legislation and given the resources that they have and the abilities they have, we just thought that would be a better and faster solution to getting this information, which of course, again, we're getting just information. States make these decisions. Yes, last question? And then we got to go. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, so I know you're looking outside, but internally, some of your colleagues, everybody from on both sides, Ilhan Omar to Marjorie Taylor Greene, have been accused of making anti-Semitic comments in the past. Do you think that awareness and education should also be happening here? And how concerned are you in terms of some of the knowledge of your colleagues on the Jewish community and the Holocaust and how it impacts Jews and conservatives?
I think, listen, I think anti-Semitism, wherever we see it, we should speak out against it. I think that's our responsibility, and it's part of why it's really important that we have education. And I know that all of us talk to our colleagues all the time and try to share information. So, I don't know if anyone wants to add anything.
One last thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, come back again. So one of the jewels of our country of Washington is the United States Holocaust Museum and Memorial. And there are 10 appointed trustees, 5 in the Senate, 5 in the House, bipartisan. I'm one of those, which is one of my great privileges in serving in the House. To your question, education doesn't stop in school. Education goes through life. And so we have, in the spring, we have a ceremony here recognizing and memorializing the victims of the Holocaust. We have people, both parties, Republicans and Democrats, across the entire political spectrum, honoring those people. It's something that we need to make sure that all people have a better and fuller understanding of the Holocaust, of the events leading up to the Holocaust, and the steps we can take to prevent anything like it ever happening. So, thank you.
Yeah, let me just add one thing. Our bipartisan task force to combat anti-Semitism recently met with 2 members of the British Parliament to talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in both countries. And I learned from those members, they have actually put together a course that all new members of Parliament take to learn about anti-Semitism. They said they put this in place because so many of their members fall into anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracy theories out of ignorance. And so they put this course together, and we thought that was a very interesting approach to take, and we're looking at doing the same thing here because we do need to make sure all of our members are educated about the dangers of anti-Semitism, the dangers of conspiracy theories, and that they act out of knowledge, not out of ignorance. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, everyone. We got to go vote. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.